Oh my goodness, folks, here we go all over again. Happy Hump Day, my favorite day of the week. This is Michael, of course, in the wee hours of the night on the graveyard shift with your daily trivia question. Once again, a really cool trivia question. I didn't realize how cool this trivia question was until I chose it first, till it came up in my search engines, and I chose it and I put it out there, and I got so much feedback from this trivia question. It was really, really cool to research and a really cool question overall. So, without further ado, the answer to the previous trivia question was, of course, a podcast. A great, great platform. More specifically, the podcast called Serial from 2014. Check this out, folks. In 2014, podcasts were a relatively new and creative medium. They were just kind of getting started. I won't go that far. They had been around, but they hadn't really been kind of discovered to the extent that they are now. A lot of people were only experimenting with this platform in digital download format, right? But for a number of reasons, it hadn't really taken off. This was kind of a basement setup type of feel to it. You know, you had kind of people sitting in their basement, kind of tinkering around with it. Type of an aspect, type of a feel, type of a vibe, right? You got me? So additionally, true crime series were being done to death. These had been around for a while. Stuff like Law and Order, and Netflix was getting into it as well. And it had been done to death on so many levels. All right, so all that changed on the evening of October 4th, 2014. Very truly changed when the first of what would be 12 episodes of the podcast called Serial made its debut. For 1 week at a time, Serial reinvestigated a 1999 murder of a high school girl and the evidence, or the lack thereof rather, that put her ex-boyfriend in jail for life. Each podcast wound up weaving an incredibly engaging story about this tragic event, and it had a very unique appeal, kind of a niche, if you will. I'm always talking about finding that niche. This hit it out of the park. This was the money shot right here. And it had an appeal to all ages, right? It caught on quick, and it literally caught on quick overnight. And it was in podcast format. So Serial ended up breaking download records, becoming the fastest podcast to reach 5 million iTunes downloads and reaching 75 million downloads by March of 2015, almost just a little bit of a year, or less than a year actually. 75 million downloads. Serial proved to be quite the game changer in many ways. It revitalized the true crime category of programming. Now people were back into this kind of thing. And it revolutionized the podcast digital format, quite frankly, single-handedly. Or some say. I say that it single-handedly did that. It was both commercially unproven and journalistically untested. Okay? It broke down those doors for podcasts. It truly helped kick off the so-called great podcast boom of the 2010s and early 2020s that we now know today, inspiring a huge list of successors and imitators. Okay, 8 years after the show's debut, the podcast circuit has never been more crowded or competitive, and you all know that. You can just get on your chosen podcast provider, and you can see that there's so many different categories, so many different podcasts out there now. And Serial had a lot to do with that. Serial went on to win multiple awards and is widely acknowledged as the inspiration for the subsequent surge in both listening to and production of podcasts. Suddenly, anyone and everyone was doing it. Suddenly, anyone and everyone was trying it. We all realized that we could do this with very easy, accessible technology, and you could get this stuff on Amazon. Quite frankly, you just order it and plug it up and go to work, right? With a little bit of savviness, you too could have your own podcast, and a lot of people did, and they still do. One media analyst summed it up like this: what happened with Serial in podcasting, in the podcasting world, was like going from the 1950s, where then there were only 3 or 4 television networks on air, to a vast and unlimited ocean of content. And that is very true. That is very accurate summation. I remember a time, that he continued, I remember a time when I could keep up on new podcast series, but nowadays that seems virtually impossible. Serial had a lot to do with that. Again, everybody's doing it now. Serial had kind of a human, it brought a human voice to this reinvestigative aspect. It used cliffhangers. There was an insider access unlike anything else, because it was done on a podcast, right? It was done on this digital download, kind of a narrative conversation. It garnered a huge amount of media attention. Suddenly, overnight, everyone was listening to this, and advertisers love that. And I'll come back. I'll address that. Podcasts proved to be effective marketing tools because they helped brands reach a niche and a targeted audience. And according to research, and hang on one second, folks, my phone is ringing. All right, folks, sorry about that. Had a little emergency to take care of, duty calls, but I'm back at it. As I was saying, I digress just a little bit. Podcasting proved to be an effective tool for marketing. It revolutionized and brought into the forefront what researchers in marketing, those in the marketing profession, call hyper-targeting. It helped to hyper-target audiences and give them a good return on investment. So podcasting really revolutionized. Advertisers loved podcasting, and they still do. And Serial had a lot to do with that when it ushered its way onto the scene, for sure. A couple of cool geek factoids about Serial and podcasting. According to later interviews with Serial's creators, Julie Snyder and Sarah Koenig, you might have heard of them because of Serial, and thereafter, the podcast was somewhat experimental, and they did not expect much success. Boy, would they turn out wrong. That was a good mistake to make, good problem to have. Serial won too many awards to list, including a Peabody in April 2015. Folks, you're doing something right if you can win a Peabody. I'm going to tell you that right now. As of September of 2018, episodes of seasons 1 and 2 have been downloaded over, check this out, 340 million times, and that has established an ongoing podcast world record. That is recurring. That is ongoing. It has spawned several companion podcasts, and of this year's statistics, check this out. Now, we talked earlier about how podcasting hadn't really come into its own being just yet. This is this year's statistics. That was 2014. This is this year's statistics. 38% of people in the United States over the age of 12, or roughly 109 million people, say they listen to at least one podcast a month. I would argue that is higher than that, actually. I'm interested if anybody's ever tried podcasting. I'm going to tell you right now, I am on the verge of breaking into podcasting. I'm researching equipment. I already have some good ideas about different podcasting talks and shows and narratives I'd like to do, more specifically about music, heavy metal music. Everybody knows, if they listen to my trivia questions, I am a metalhead. So I'm thinking about breaking into it, folks. I'll let you know. All right, folks, getting over that hump in Hump Day with a little help with this trivia question for October 5th. Here we go. On this day in 1969, this sketch comedy series in the UK premieres for the first time, known for its absurd situations, sight gags, and risky humor, whose group of 6 were named after a snake and an aerial carnival. Say what? Good luck, folks. I heard this show was quite the albatross. Have a happy hump day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care of each other, and thanks for all you do. Peace out.